Okay, so it's been a few days removed now since the Drew and Dame trades, and so let's look at how the Bucks and Celtics match up against each other and also how they match up against the top teams in the East. I mean, I think nearly every team in the East is interesting, but for the sake of this conversation, we're going to have a cutoff point, as in it's going to be the top 5 seeds of last season plus Miami. So apologies to the Nets, who still finished with the 6th seed, and I'm excited for them this upcoming season. Apologies to the Hawks, who I think can be better under Snyder. It's just there had to be a cutoff somewhere. And by the way, while I will say many nice things about these two teams, we're going to go over some of these teams' weaknesses as well. With the Bucks, perimeter defense after trading Drew, even if their rim protection should still be great. With the Celtics, do they need a little bit more size up front? Yes, and also they still, even if he's going to play less minutes and all that, they still are relying so much on Horford to stay healthy, man. And he's in his late 30s now. You're hoping Porzingis stays healthy. I think they could use probably one more good wing off the bench. And yes, while I do love Jaylen Brown, and while I do think that a lot of the takes that I've seen about him this offseason are kind of insane, yes, he does need to still be more consistent with his handle and get a little better at making reads against defenses that are all over him and stuff like that. So anyway, I think the biggest question you can ask every other team in the Eastern Conference right now is, do you have an option for the Giannis Dame pick and roll? It's difficult to find many teams who can switch that reliably and not put themselves in a mismatch between one of those two guys. I think it's also very difficult to the point where it might not even be worth trying to put 2 to the ball on Dame, because then you're looking at either, if the rotations are slow or whatever, it's Giannis open going to the rim, or it's somebody's open for 3. Between Middleton, Brook, Malik Beasley, Connaughton, and teams will dare Beauchamp to make shots. We'll see there. You could try more of a typical drop, but it better be really good where the guard gets around the screen, because if you've got a big backing up on Dame, we know that could just be pull-up threes all day, so your screen navigation on the guard needs to be really good. I could picture teams switching it and then immediately doubling and leaving someone open. It's going to be very tough, and a lot of teams are going to mess it up, and the Bucks are going to put up a lot of points just running that two-man game. Hell, teams could do it right, and they'll still put up a lot of points. I think Miami could say, well, we have Bam, and he's as switchable as anybody you can find. And he's also one of the few guys who you can put on Giannis just in a one-on-one setting, and you're not immediately going to get torched, right? And of course, Spo is a genius. He could probably have a top 10 defense with me on his team. Jimmy could be like another switchable guy within the Giannis Dame pick and roll. It's just, do you want to put that much on Jimmy's plate with how much he has to do on offense for you? I don't know. And look, I know Miami, they lost out on Dame and Drew in the offseason. Kyle Lowry's a year older. Max Strus and Gabe Vincent are out the door. Jay Rich is here now. I know it's cliche, but at this point, just never count out Miami. So I imagine Horford is still your go-to Giannis guy for Boston, and of course we're always just hoping for their sake and my sake as a fan that Horford, he can just keep on holding up, man. In regular season, I've already said I think he's going to come off the bench, but in specific playoff matchups, potentially against the Bucks, he could start. I think at one time Horford could switch onto guards and look pretty good with it, and he can still do it in a pinch nowadays, but I don't want Horford switching onto Dame. And so the Celtics might have to play more of a high drop sort of defense against those two. And look, Derek White and Drew are 2 of the best screen navigating guards you can find, and also just one-on-one defensive guards you can find too. So you have that. You have Horford, who has, for the most part, been really solid defensively against Giannis, even if Giannis is still going to get his numbers against him. And then you have Porzingis as a help guy, although even that's tough because he's probably going to have to help off of Brook, and we all know how good of a shooter Brook is now. The Bucks are still going to be very hard to guard no matter how you deal with that two-man game. That's the type of template that I think you need to have to imagine guarding those two, where it's really good on-ball defenders, guy who can actually hang versus Giannis somewhat, and then help defense at the rim. And Tatum and Jaylen could probably at times have possessions on Giannis, and I do think the Celtics are going to need a 3/4, another one. Basically someone who can be what Grant Williams was doing for him. You look at the other teams, and I'll get to how these teams match up to the Celtics too, but we're on Bucks mode right now. The Cavs, sure, they definitely have the rim protection between Mobley and Allen, but I do think, Mobley, what is he? He's 222 pounds right now. That's what I just looked up. He gained some weight in the offseason, as of course every player gained 7 pounds of muscle in the offseason. It's probably still a little too late to ask him to be the Giannis guy like that. They've had possessions where Jared Allen has guarded Giannis in half courts, and okay, Jared Allen certainly a good rim protector, knows what he's doing, playing drop or higher up on screens, whatever. But for Cleveland, it's how are they going to deal with Dame? I mean, the best bet would be Isaac Okoro, but then you're having the Isaac Okoro conversation, which is teams don't guard him pretty much. Even if his percentages are good, they're on very low volume. Now, for what it's worth, I do think that Garland and Mitchell's team defense was actually pretty damn good last year. You know, Zach Lowe talked about this a lot with Cleveland last year. Of course, in the playoffs, they eventually lost to the Knicks' physicality and their offensive rebounding, and Mobley's offense still not totally being there. As I will have another regular season of being like, so how's Mobley's like 2 dribbles off of screens looking? How is his mid-range looking? How is the post-ups, like even against switches or whatever, how's that all looking? And of course, if the corner 3 can hit for him, that'd be huge. But Cleveland's going to be really good. I know the temperature on them's a little lukewarm after the disappointing round 1, but they'll be really good. And I assume the Mobley-Allen front court will once again be just amazing defensively. If we can go to the Knicks, who did beat them, and then we'll get to Philly and how they match up with the Bucks and 2-man game, whatever. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, the Knicks. I mean, you imagine Quentin Grimes as the Dame guy. You imagine, I mean, they've had Randall on Giannis. I mean, from a physical standpoint, Randall, big dude, can move, I get it. And then Mitchell Robinson is a help guy. Like, honestly, I think the thing that the Knicks would have going for them more than your average team versus those two is how much they could kind of swarm and then get back to their guys. I mean, it's a gamble, don't get me wrong, but, you know, DiVincenzo, I know quickly he's got some weird contract thing right now, but, like, he was a really good defender for them last year. Josh Hart knows what he's doing defensively. Just a lot of, like, quick swipes, get back to your guy, that sort of thing. And then we get to Philly. I mean, they have had PJ Tucker guard Giannis some. They've had Embiid guard Giannis some as well. They don't like to do the Embiid thing for an entire game. And so, okay, that's a lot of strength that you can throw at Giannis, and it's something he has to at least deal with, you know, even if he's still going to get his numbers and all that, roll into the basket, whatever. But Philly's perimeter defense against Dame, I mean, they got 2 real options there. It's Pat Bev and it's DeAnthony Melton. I think the thing with Philly right now is that all of their best defensive players, outside of Embiid, of course, are defense-first guys, and so the fear is, like, are you sacrificing too much offense to put more defense out there? But still, as of right now, you know, the Harden thing is just kind of looming over Philly, so we'll see there. Now, if we can look at the Bucks' perimeter defense, I mean, the rest of the East between Brunson, between, you know, Drew, who, yeah, Drew's not like a 25 points a game guy, but he certainly can operate a screen, you know, and Tatum and Jalen, they can get switched onto the smaller guys in the Bucks on the perimeter. We all know how playoff Jimmy can get mismatch hunting and force switches and all that. The Cavs with Garland and Mitchell. Philly with, as of right now, we will see what happens. I don't know James Harden, but definitely Tyrese Maxey. If Quinn Snyder can turn Atlanta around like that after a blah last season, then yeah, you can put Trae Young in here as well. The Hawks are going to have to prove that they're a level above what they were last season first. Like, there's talented dudes on the perimeter who are going to be guarded by not so great defenders on the Bucks. We'll just put it like that. But I think when the Bucks rim protection is still as good as it is, the teams are going to have to just shoot extremely well on threes, pull-up twos, floaters, that sort of stuff, because as long as Giannis and Brook are there, the teams are just not going to get that many shots at the rim, and the ones that they do get are just going to be at a lower made percentage than, you know, than if you're facing anybody else pretty much. It's just what the Bucks have done for years now. Anyway, to go to the other side of this for the Celtics, I mean, as far as how the Bucks would guard the Celtics, the last time they faced each other, the big takeaway was the Celtics attempted way more threes than the Bucks did. Of course, Middleton did not play in that series, that matters. But depending on how Adrian Griffin just feels about the defense, and if they're still just going to be super rim protection mode for the sake of giving up threes, then I do think with Porzingis now on the team and his tendency to pick and pop, and, you know, sometimes, more than sometimes, a good amount of the time he will get into, like, the mid-range stuff and taking his, like, 12-foot jumpers over switches, and he's been more physical around the rim, all that nice stuff. But he does get his pick and pops from 3 on, right? And I do think that series could result in the Celtics taking kind of a crazy amount of threes. And so it might just come down to those, but I do think a huge part of it would still be like just how much can Tatum and Jalen convert drives to the rim versus the Bucks. And I imagine they would try to get like Tatum switched onto Dame or Jalen switched onto Dame or Malik Beasley or Connaughton. I mean, Connaughton fights hard. It's just there's a size difference there. But look, the Bucks, their rim protection, it's still going to be great. You know, as long as you got Giannis and Brook down there, even if the guards are going to get beat sometimes, you got those two waiting for you. Middleton still knows what he's doing well. They're still going to be tough to score on. I would bet they're still towards the top of the league in defensive rating and all that. I do also look forward to seeing how they guard Drew in the playoffs. And by that, I mean just Drew playing against like a dropping Brook and being like, oh, now I'm on the other side of this. Cool. Anyway, for other teams, look, man, as for Miami, as long as Jimmy, Bam, and Spo are there, I don't care who's around them on that team. I don't care who's on the Celtics. I will be terrified of that matchup until, I don't know, Jimmy is no longer playing for them. I mean, you do need to be able to put like some good, bigger wings on Tatum and Jalen, with which we've seen Miami do it, and we've seen Jimmy occasionally make Jalen look, kind of silly. And also just being physical and switching against those guys has also at times made their offense stagnant. I've talked about all this before. And so with the Knicks, that's, physical defenders. It's like Quinn Grimes, Josh Hart, that sort of thing. I mean, if there was ever a time for RJ to reach his full potential, which he does show flashes of at times on defense, then it would be for the Knicks' sake against the Celtics. That is for Cleveland. Well, to be fair, I actually would like to see Evan Mobley guarding Jason Tatum in the playoffs and what that whole thing looks like. Not that I think he would start on him, but, I could picture it, switches or whatever. Would also love to see Drew and Derek White guard Garland and Mitchell. As for Philly, I mean, I think we saw last playoffs, like the Celtics, they're just too athletic for Philly, man. I mean, Jalen had a couple games there where he basically just locked up Harden. The way that they could swarm Embiid and make him into more of a passer but still close out to their guys. But at the same time, that was also, with Rob entering the starting lineup, which is what really shifted that series and kind of broke the Harden and Embiid pick and roll. Well, he's not here now, but as long as Horford can hold up, I feel like Porzingis can be that help guy. I mean, I do think for most of the time he's going to be guarding centers, but when they're both out there together, I would guess Horford is guarding the 5. You picture Drew and Derek White guarding Harden. If he's not going to be there, well then, depending on what their return is, then that might be a whole nother conversation about their future. But even if it's Maxey, it's just, the Celtics are just such a bad matchup for the Sixers, man. Then you know what? For everything I just said, it might still be because Horford is one of the few guys who you can put on Embiid and he's not immediately going to get killed. But once again, need Horford to hold up.